If you've watched my channel for very long, you're probably well aware of one thing, and that is that Pokémon, despite its family-friendly nature, has been subject to a lot of wild and crazy censorship over the years. So much so, in fact, that I've been able to make 4 whole videos covering it all. Well, if you can believe it, not even 4 videos was enough to cover all of the wild censorship in Pokémon that's out there, and as such, that is what we are here to look at once again today. So let's go ahead and get into it. Now, I'll be the first to say that after 4 videos of this stuff, good and interesting examples of crazy censorship do become harder to come by, but I was still able to find some interesting stuff that I thought made for a good video. Like, for instance, the banning and temporary removal of certain episodes of the anime. I have discussed this stuff in the past, but surprisingly, there is quite a decent list of episodes that have been subject to this kind of treatment, and there's still a few that I have yet to cover. Like, for instance, the Tower of Terror. This episode is one that you likely remember because it's pretty iconic, as it's where we get introduced to Ash's Haunter that he uses to later defeat Sabrina in his gym battle with her. Well, despite nothing ban-worthy happening in the episode itself, this episode was temporarily banned from re-airing on Kids WB back in the day due to the 9/11 terrorist attacks, since this episode's name, the Tower of Terror, could unfortunately coincide with those events. However, after some time, this episode was able to eventually be put back on the air. Another episode that was temporarily delayed due to real-world events was An Undersea Place to Call Home, from the X and Y arc. This episode involves the gang meeting 2 characters named Eddie and Lindsay, who are currently investigating the whereabouts of a sunken ship. This episode was planned to premiere in Japan on April 24th of 2014. However, it experienced some extremely unfortunate timing which caused its premiere to be delayed, as just 8 days before this, on April 16th, a ship in South Korea known as the MV Sewol had also capsized and sunk. This resulted in a delay for this episode, causing it to premiere for the first time in August of that same year, about 4 months later, and in South Korea instead of Japan. Japan would later see the episode in November of that same year, and it wouldn't make its English debut until almost a year after its originally scheduled premiere in February of 2015. In addition to delayed episodes, though, there have also been episodes that have straight up been banned entirely. A lot of the time when episodes are banned, they are banned regionally in countries that are known to ban a lot of things, so it's not really seen as much of a surprise. However, would you ever have believed that an episode of the Pokémon anime would be banned in Ireland, of all places? Me neither, but it happened. The episode The Bicker the Better from the Ruby and Sapphire arc has been banned in Ireland as well as other countries, and it's believed that it is due to the Battle of the Sexes format of this episode, as we see Ash and James battle it out against May and Jessie. Apparently, this was thought by some to encourage sexism, which is thought to be the reason for the ban in Ireland as well as the other countries. Speaking of banned episodes, a rather recent and infamous occurrence of this happened in the Sun and Moon arc. The episode, titled Ash and Passimian, Touchdown of Friendship, was not aired anywhere else outside of Asia due to parts of the episode where Ash dresses up in a Passimian disguise, which ultimately resembles the blackface stereotype, and therefore its lack of a dubbed version is expected. Usually, when censorship happens in Pokémon, it's the dub that does ridiculous and out-of-line stuff. But this time, it's rather puzzling that the anime would do this sort of thing again after there was heavy controversy surrounding the same topic with Jinx years earlier. That literally forced them to alter Jinx's design and has limited Jinx's appearance in both the games and the anime since then. So why they thought it was a good idea to move forward with this after already having experienced all of that is a rather head-scratching move. Another form of censorship that happens with anime episodes has to do, of course, with dub edits, from the original Japanese version to the English version, and sometimes versions in other countries too. A somewhat peculiar time where this occurred was in the episode Aiming for the Top Floor, also from the Sun and Moon arc. In it, Ash has to compete in a series of challenges while attempting to take on the Cantonian Gym in Mali City, and this involved editing a number of scenes that were apparently too dangerous and violent for Western viewers. This included some scenes that involved shurikens being colored pink and having suction cups added to the edges, and also a scene with a wrecking ball that was also colored pink in the dub as well. Now, on the one hand, I can kind of understand editing the shurikens as they are technically weapons. However, on the other hand, it does seem a bit unnecessary, and coloring everything pink as a way of editing this is just the most obnoxious way imaginable to make these things seem more safe and appropriate. So this bit of censorship, in my opinion, is a bit over the top. Another dub edit that was a little more justified, however, occurs in a classic episode, Here Comes the Squirtle Squad. In this episode, we see the Squirtle Squad harassing Ash and his friends, and they capture Ash, Misty, Brock, and Pikachu while Pikachu is hurt. Pikachu needs some medicine, so the Squirtle Squad decide to let Ash go get some medicine, but they say that they will dye Misty's hair purple if he doesn't make it back in time. However, in the original Japanese version, it's a different kind of dye that is mentioned, because the Squirtle Squad actually say that they will execute Misty if Ash doesn't make it back in time instead. Now, the wildness in this case comes from what was censored here rather than the censorship itself, because some Squirtles threatening to kill a person is pretty intense. However, I think it's kind of hilarious that the threat of someone dying was changed to dyeing their hair. And if that doesn't sum up what the censorship of the English dub of the anime is like, I don't know what will. The anime isn't the only form of Pokemon media that has been censored though, so let's shift gears now and take a look at the games. In Pokemon Diamond and Pearl at Victory Road, you'll eventually run into a veteran known as Edgar. After defeating him in battle, he says, "You blaze with so much vitality." However, in the original Japanese version, he reportedly says something along the lines of, "Every Pokemon and human will die one day, and that is precisely why we shine." Now, that's a little abruptly morbid, so I can see why they decided to change this. Even when the subject of death comes up in Pokemon, they tend to skirt around it and sugarcoat it as much as they can. So just coming out and saying everyone's gonna die with no warning is just a tad strong. So this is, once again, more of a case of what was censored being wild rather than the censorship itself. Now, when it comes to Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, I have discussed other censorship from this game in my previous censorship videos as well, such as how Diamond and Pearl's sprite of Registeel was altered for the European release of the game due to Registeel's pose resembling a Nazi salute. However, believe it or not, that is not where this story ends, as this controversial sprite actually made a reappearance in Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, where it resurfaced and was displayed on the Time Travel Award that can be received when transporting a Registeel from the original Diamond and Pearl to the remakes. This was eventually removed once again and replaced with the updated sprite via an update, but it's kind of crazy that it was able to sneak its way back into the games, even for a brief moment, all these years later. Along with the games, we've also got to give the manga some representation too, because something wacky is always happening in the manga. This one is rather infamous as well, but you know, I think it's good to bring up Pokémon Rebirth every once in a while so that we're all reminded that this is a thing that actually happened. Now, this wasn't a case of censorship so much as it was a case of the manga not being translated into English at all, effectively meaning the whole entire thing was censored from us. Presumably because not only is this manga all about people fusing with Pokemon to become Pokemon human hybrids, which is a bit out there already by Pokemon standards, but its lack of translation also probably has to do with the fact that this manga was a rather mature one, and was pretty significantly sexualized, which is just made all the stranger by the whole Pokemon human hybrid aspect, so basically they knew that this manga was wild right from the get-go, and they knew that it was going to be too much for English audiences, which resulted in them stopping it before it could even become a thing in English at all. I, for one, however, am glad that Rebirth exists, even if it is just in Japanese, because it is easily one of the most fascinating little nuggets of Pokemon history that has ever existed. And last but not least, we've got an interesting story to tell about the TCG as well. This is somewhat of a different example, but does have to do with censorship to a degree since it involves Pokemon in China, who have been known to limit what is allowed within their country. So, late last year in the fall of 2022, the TCG finally made its way to mainland China for the first time, as the Pokemon Company has finally begun printing the cards in simplified Chinese. The quirky thing about this story, however, is that the first sets that were released back in the fall of 2022 were Sun and Moon related sets, meaning that the cards were being newly released even though they were about 6 years old everywhere else. It's interesting that they decided to begin with Sun and Moon of all things for this exact reason, especially because they could have just begun with whatever set was the most current at the time. With that said, it was also reported that these new Chinese sets would release quickly in order to catch up to the current schedule, but nevertheless, it does make for an interesting and kind of quirky story. With that said though, that is all of the wild censorship I have got for you guys today. If you want to see even more wild censorship, you can check out any of the 4 previous videos on this topic that are currently on my channel if you haven't already. And if you liked this video, be sure to leave it a like and subscribe if you're new for more Pokemon content. With that said, I'll be back with another new video very soon, and until then, as always, thank you guys so much for watching this one, I really appreciate it, and I will smell you guys later.